Okay, so welcome to Budgeting 101. So I want to start with some introductions. I am your presenter. I'm Diane. I work at Southeast Uplift as a fiscal sponsorship program manager, which means that I coach a portfolio of around 25 community-based organizations, and a lot of that coaching has to do with budgeting. I also have a background in I used to be an admin. I was an admin for about 5 years where I did budget projections and I managed different budgets. I'm coming at you with that experience as well in the public sector. So go ahead in the chat. Could you please share your name and organization? And then also just be real with me. What feelings come up when you think of the word budget? Okay. So Lindsay says budget gives me paperwork anxiety and existential dread. Yes, it can feel very overwhelming, very scary. Michelle says budget makes me think of keeping track of things I have a very hard keeping track of. Totally get that. Hopefully today we can talk about how you can build systems, very simple systems that just keep in to just to keep track of everything. Um but Marley says, when I think of budget, I think complicated. Yeah, budgets can be pretty complicated, right? They can be really simple or really complicated. Brittany says we need to know all the bits and pieces of budgeting. That's great because this is very much a beginner's workshop. So we aren't going to get into the complications that Marley mentioned. We're going to focus on the building blocks and then you can build out your budget. Um, AC says budgets are a puzzle that can be both satisfying and intimidating. Yes, I agree. I love solving a problem, like figuring out where there's a discrepancy in a budget, or if I have to do budget, like budget cuts or move money around. I love that challenge. Kathy, thanks for joining us from Concordia. I love Concordia Neighborhood Association. Um, and then, yeah, it seems like the last thing I update, even though I really appreciate them. Yeah, budgets it can take a lot to keep track. Um, Catherine says budget means funding opportunities and learning on the job. Yeah, so budgets can be very useful as well. Okay, that's great. So thank you, everybody. Like I said, we are focused. So I work with a lot of younger grassroots organizations. And because of that, I think it's important to just start with the basic building blocks of budgeting. So this workshop is very much beginner friendly. So first things first, we're going to talk about why does budgeting even matter? Like what beyond paperwork, why does it matter? Beyond compliance, why does it matter? Then we'll discuss some key budgeting terms that you may have seen come up on grant applications, or maybe your boards mention them. Then we're going to demystify the budget process. So just bare bones, what does the budget process need to include? And then after that, we're going to do an activity where I'm going to ask you all to categorize line items into a budget where you're going to pretend you're an organization, just to kind of start getting you to work those muscles of budgeting and keeping track of budgets. So at the plainest description, a budget is a financial document that provides an overview of how the organization plans to spend money. So in essence, it's just saying, hey, we're going to spend this money and we're going to make this money. That's at the bare bones, at the bare minimum, that is what a budget is. So why is it so important though? Well, how do any of these resonate with you all, that maybe you've applied for a grant and your goals were unclear to a funder, or maybe you started running out of money before what you were setting out to do was completed, or had surprise expenses coming up that you don't exactly know what to do with that because you weren't planning on that. Does this resonate with anybody here?
Definitely the surprise expenses coming up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's happened to me too, where we're like, whoa, like fun fact, when your subscription to Zoom, your discount subscription runs out, suddenly you're paying twice as much and you didn't realize that you had to do that. Real life example that we're going through at Southeast Uplift. But yes, so so with budgeting, uh it can help you essentially prepare for these circumstances. So, a few key reasons why budgeting is so important. Well, number one, it tells the story of your organization and what you prioritize. So, especially if you're like a nonprofit, which this is very much geared towards nonprofits, this workshop. If you apply for grants, the funders have to be able to review your budget and reasonably understand what you are going to do with the money you are requesting. So the more detailed your budget is, the more clear it is to a funder, the more likely they will be to give you that money. But also, budgeting in general, what you spend your money on shows what you value and what you prioritize. So it serves as a narrative of your organization. Number two, it helps you develop fundraising goals and strategies. So if you have an understanding of what you need every year to continue to operate, it then helps you understand what money you need to bring in each year, or if not, then where you need to adjust and what you need to plan for. Like I said earlier, it makes grant applications more efficient. So I have seen organizations have this situation where a funder reaches out and says, we have this pool of money. We need to get this money out. How would you spend it if we gave this money to you? But we need you to tell us by tomorrow. And if you have some pre-prepared budgets, such as a budget for carrying out a certain program, you can just give that to the funder directly. Or if you apply to a grant, you can just keep copying and pasting your same budget. And also grants, they ask you for really scary things such as profit and loss statements, or they'll ask you for your annual budget. So it's important to just have those on hand. That way you could just quickly get grants out. Finally, it empowers you to identify potential shortfalls proactively. So if you are keeping track of your budget over the year and you are monitoring your funds and what's coming in and what's going out, you can anticipate that you may need to move something around or revise your budget. So it helps you anticipate it before it's the end of the year and you've completely run out of money, um, which can happen. Okay, so here is a very brief list of key budgeting terms we are going to talk about today. How are these feeling to you all? Which of these is the scariest to you? Feel free to shout it out. We're not scared. We're comfortable with these.
I dropped it in the chat, but net income, there's a few in the chat.
Oh, there's a few in the, I'm not getting these chats. Thank you. Oh, okay. I see what's happening. There we go. Thank you so much. I was not seeing any of those. Okay, net income, annual budget, profit and loss statement. Okay, I have to admit, profit and loss statement was the scariest one for me, especially because I see a lot of grant makers ask for that. So let's just go step by step on what these mean. So let's start with revenue. In essence, that's just money that comes into your organization. It's money in. It's also the term income. So the most common types of revenue for nonprofits are contributed income, so contributed revenue, which would be donated funds such as grants or individual contributions, or earned income. So that would be funds collected through business transactions. So things such as having a contract with someone, or if you sold goods or services. So say you sell t-shirts or something, or you have a contract with Multnomah County to carry out some kind of service. So there's contributed, meaning someone contributed to you, or earned, meaning you had to work for that. So you earned those funds. Next up, oh, wait, no, I'm going to ask you a question. What are some sources? Let's think through this. What are some sources of revenue for your organization?
You want it in the chat or
Feel free to tell me or say it in the chat, whatever works best for you.
well, Dumpster Day is a big revenue source for our neighborhood association, and also we've gotten a few grants the last couple of years that have let us have a big neighborhood party and paint a street mural and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's
So
great.
that what if you had to put those in these categories, where would you put them?
Um, well, let's see. Uh, so contributed income, I guess, would be the grants and earned income. We work really hard for Dumpster Day. I mean, we're actually out there putting things into the dumpsters and cleaning up and asking for donations. And so,
Mm-hmm. I would still classify that as contributed income because you don't want to get in trouble with having to claim that on your taxes because it
right,
still is a
right,
donation.
right.
However, that's a good point. So in essence, a dumpster day is a big fundraising effort for Roseway Neighborhood Association. And many neighborhood associations that some kind of dumpster day is a big form of revenue to them because usually people will get a grant, so the contributed income in form of a grant to carry out a cleanup or a dumpster day, and then they'll ask people for donations at that event. So then that's revenue. Okay, Lindsay says grants and individual donations. Yes, you do. Um, Brittany is, oh, and Lindsay, you also have business donations too. Corporate give or not corporate, but you have business giving, you do fundraising too, right? Brittany says can revenue be both contributed and earned? Yes, absolutely. So, for instance, you can be an organization that gets donations, but then also works with the community and has does something for a service. So some like kind of lower level earned income would be, say you are an organization who sells t-shirts at events, but you're mostly a nonprofit, but you sell t-shirts or tote bags or something. That would be earned income. Or one of the organizations we work with, they get a lot of grants, but then they also get government contracts to do workshops in communities. So then they are essentially contracted and earn revenue for conducting workshops. Okay, and Mira says that they do an annual fundraiser and a gala. They do fee for service contracts and grants. Yes, so fee for service. So like essentially, if you have some kind of skill or something or some kind of service that you provide and people pay you for that service. Great. Okay, and now we're moving into expenses. So those are the costs that come out of your organization. So tracking your expenses is pretty critical to maintaining a good budget. So when I think about expenses, I like to categorize them into three easy to understand categories. That's where I start. And so the most common types of expenses for smaller or newer nonprofits would be operating expenses or costs. And so that those would be the costs associated with keeping the organization going. So it would be utilities, rent, so office space rent or rent, building rent, necessary equipment or software. So Zoom is a big operating expense that I see people have, or Google Workspace. So whatever you need to operate daily in your organization, office supplies and other materials. So whatever just day to day to keep the organization moving. Secondly, there are personnel costs. So salaries are less likely with smaller organizations, but stipends are more common with smaller organizations. But once nonprofits get bigger, they can anticipate having to calculate personnel costs such as salaries and benefits. And then finally, the third type of category in a basic budget would be program costs. So a program cost would be if you have a specific type of thing that you do. So say you do workshops, and that's one of many things your organization does. Well, you would want to keep track of your program's budget by keeping track of how much money is going into your workshop program. So at Southeast Uplift, we have a few different programs. We have the fiscal sponsorship program, we have our community small grants program, and each of us, we have a different budget that we use to carry out our work. So when you all think about your organization's expenses, what kinds of expenses are common for you?
Communication expenses,
Mm-hmm.
printing, MailChimp, Squarespace, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. I would love to talk to you offline about Squarespace because I have some orgs who really want to use it, and I'd love to talk to you about how you're using it. But yeah, so that's a good one. Your newsletter software, MailChimp, or printing things to get the word out about something.
Right.
So your flyers would be a program cost, right? Like if you're printing stuff, because it's for events, and then your MailChimp would be more of an operating cost, I would say. Okay. Lindsay says hygiene supplies, cleaning supplies, and printing costs. So I would say those first two are program costs, and printing costs might be an operating expense or a program cost. Both. Okay. Thanks, Lindsay. Okay. And then Brittany says program and personnel costs to program directors, and then flyers, materials, and time. Building rent is another big one. Yep. And so you have to, like, especially for big expenses that you're committed to over time, it's important to think through how much does that cost me annually, which is okay. So someone talked about net income and how that was scary. Well, at its basic form, your net income is just your revenue minus your expenses. And we're going to practice figuring out our net income and an activity here pretty soon. But that's all it is. It's your revenue. So what you brought in minus what went out. That's net income. But when we talk about annual budgets, so annual budgets, they represent all of the forecasted revenue and expenses over the course of 12 months. And the term fiscal year is often used by folks. And so that's just 12 months as defined by your organization. So organizations define their fiscal year differently. So fiscal year just means this is the year that this is the time frame we are tracking our 12-month budget. That's all that means. Most of the time, a fiscal year follows either a calendar year, so January 1 to December 31st, or it follows like the federal government, state government, city government, a lot of government follows a July 1 to June 30th fiscal year. Now there's some other fiscal years that are a little different, a little wonky, but these are the most common. So an annual budget months and how much you expect to go out over 12 months. So that's the 12-month view. Now, a profit and loss statement at its very basic form is just a report of what the organization has spent and earned over a specific period of time. So in some cases, that period of time could be a month, it can be a quarter, or it could be for the entire year. At Southeast Uplift, we do our profit and loss statement every quarter. Now, a profit and loss statement often compares where the organization is at against the predicted budget. And that makes something called a budget to actuals report. So say you anticipated that you were going to spend $4,000 of supplies during a fiscal year, and you ended up only spending $3,500. So your budget was $4,000 and your actual was $3,500. That's all that means, is that this is what we thought we would spend. This is what we actually spent. This is what we thought we would make. This is what we've actually made. So that's all that is. But a lot of funders like to see a profit and loss statement because they just like to see how you're spending your money and essentially how much money you have left. Oh, it looks like maybe there's a question. Are profit and loss statements for grants directly, or are they program specific? So profit and loss statements, organizationally, it's good to have, and I'm going to get into this budget process, but in general, you should be able to prepare a profit and loss statement, and your organization should decide how often you want to do a profit, how often you want to provide that. I've just seen that. My first experience with it is I saw it on grants a lot. Our grantor is looking for the complete profit and loss or specific to the program. They're usually looking for it from the whole organization. So usually a profit and loss statement, they want to see essentially the financial position of the whole organization. And if you're fiscally sponsored, they want to see it of your fiscal sponsor, actually. They don't want to see it from you, which is interesting. So this is the budget process. This is a very basic budget process. So we start with, in quarters 3 and 4 of the previous fiscal year, we start with preparing and approving the budget. And I'm going to describe what each of these 5 steps means, and what should be happening. So essentially, quarters 3 and 4, you should be preparing for the next year. So then fiscal year begins around here. And then from there, you should be prepared to implement, monitor, and revise your budget. And that happens every quarter. So that happens the entire fiscal year, quarters 1 through 4. So you'll notice that every arrow just goes in one direction except monitor and revise. So monitor and revise, they have a relationship where you revise something and you should go back and monitor to see if that revision helped your budget, and just kind of keep looking back and forth. So in this next section, I'm going to go through what each one of these parts in the process means, and I'm going to give some tips on what to do for each part. So first things first, when you prepare your budget, follow these 3 steps. So first, determine what projects your organization will take on in the upcoming fiscal year. So what do you want to do? What do you want to keep doing the same programs, the same projects, or are you going to take on more? From there, make your best estimate of what money will be coming in. So are you awaiting some grant application decisions? Do you have a potential funder coming in? Are you planning on doing fees, fee for service contracts? So make your best estimate about what money will come in. And then subsequently make your best estimate at what you'll spend for the year. So be sure to include all commitments. So anytime you're paying rent or you're paying a subscription, if it's monthly, just take that and times it by 12. And then that'll give you the estimate of how much you can expect to spend. So for instance, if your rent is $400, then your annual budget rent line item will say 4,800. So a pro tip is to use your previous year's transactions as a starting point, because especially if you're going to do just the same, not just, but if you're going to do the same level of service or the same level of activities you did the prior year, your previous year's transactions can show you essentially what you can expect to spend. And also it can inform, like, say you had $2,000 left over or something, it can help you kind of figure out, oh, well, where would we spend that 2,000 this year? So that's how you prepare your budget. Now, up next, as a nonprofit organization, so this is geared towards nonprofits, your nonprofit budget must be approved by your board. So it's important when you're developing your budget to check with key collaborators to ensure that the budget accurately reflects the personnel, programmatic, and operating costs for the year. So for instance, at Southeast Uplift, we just, because we just started quarter 4, we've been working on our budget since quarter 3. My boss looked at the fiscal sponsorship program budget and she was like, you pay for this subscription every year. Do you still want that subscription? You are having a mixer this year, April 23rd. For those of you who are fiscally sponsored, please come. Is this the right amount of money that you'll need for next year to put on that mixer? And so we go back and forth, and she checks with everyone in the program to make sure that the program costs that align with our program are accurate. And then from there, a budget gets presented to our board for final approval, and any significant changes need to be passed through the board again. So a tip with this is to ensure that your budget tells a clear story. So your board, they're not in your day-to-day life most of the time, unless some are, but a lot are not. So if your board is only really looking at your budget and they don't really have a good idea of what you're doing from day to day, make sure that your budget's clear and tells a clear story. And part of that is to define any important terms or acronyms that would help them understand it. Because you wouldn't want a board member to scrutinize or criticize something you're spending money on. You would want to, hopefully, you would have kind of been able to define and defend what you're spending your money on before that. Okay, then you implement your budget. So that's the fun part. That's where you do the stuff that your organization does. So you serve the houseless folks with the hygiene supplies and the showers. You carry out your dumpster days. You do your plant sales. You do your fundraising. So you carry things out. But then while you're carrying out your activities, it's critical to document the revenue and expenses somewhere. So making sure that you have that documented, that way you don't run out of money. And in bonus, if you end up having more money, that'd be great, right? So a tip for this is to label each revenue and expense correctly to ensure proper tracking. So when you develop your budget with the contributed income line and with the earned income line, and we're about to practice going through that and tracking a fake budget just to see how you all do at it, but or get you all to practice too. But it's important to just make sure that, so if you have, say someone sent in a bunch of receipts because they bought catering for an event, well, you would want to make sure that it's properly tracked under your program costs. That way you see, okay, we had a pool of this much for program costs, and this person just took out $250 from the program costs. Therefore, we only have this much in program costs. Because most of the time in your bank or wherever you're keeping your money, it's just one big pool of money. And they don't break it out for you. And so it's important for you to keep track of what you allocated for what things. And also grants, they also make you track things in terms of categories too. So it's good for grant tracking as well. Okay, next is to monitor your budget. So it's important to review your expenses and revenue regularly. So just to make sure you're on track. And then also to compare your actual spending to your predicted budget. And if there are key differences, like differences that would really that are really surprising, identify those, because you may need to pivot, you may need to revise. So from there, you should get in the habit of reviewing your budget with your board on a regular basis. I missed the word with there. But that could be monthly, that could be quarterly, but your board should be getting a copy of your budget to see where you are where your organization is at any given moment. So a tip with this is to be clear. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I confused myself. So, okay. So some of you do events. So like, for instance, Roseway NA, you do a lot of your events in the summer. And so you may be looking at your budget and you may think, oh, we're still under budget because we still have a lot of program costs, like a lot of money left in our program costs pool. But it's important to be clear on when money is coming in. So say, or the opposite of that, say you look under or you look over budget because your revenue isn't quite where it needs to be. So being clear on when revenue comes in. So say you have a contract that comes annually in March, but in December you look over budget on something. So being clear on when your revenue comes in or when your spending occurs will help you prepare and understand your budget better. So if you do have like say you're looking at your budget and you're like, wow, we still have $3,000 left in our program costs and it's February. Don't spend it just yet because then you might go, oh, wait, we do our annual picnic in June and that costs $3,000. That's why we have that money left over. So, yes. And so then we monitor our budget. And then if we notice things that need to be changed, we then revise our budget. So it's important to understand why there are key differences in what you predicted versus your actuals. And so some common reasons for that would be if funding didn't pan out. So say you didn't get a grant you went for, or government pulled back on legislation, which has been happening to a lot of people, or overspending, less common, but and then determine what action needs to be taken. So we're not going to get into budget revisions tonight, but some action you can do is either like reduce the amount of programs you offer, or say you underspent in one budget category, you can move that money and say, okay, well, we allocated 10,000 for personnel, but we're only going to spend 5,000. Therefore, we can move the 5,000 over to program or operating. So thinking through where you can essentially move money around. So one major tip with this is when you start your annual budget and you predict your revenue, very rarely is your revenue going to be more than what you predicted. So try to be as conservative as possible and try to even try to underestimate how much money is coming in. That way you aren't caught off guard if you end up not getting enough revenue. Okay. So now I'm going to stop sharing. No, I won't stop sharing it. We're about to do a group activity. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to split you all up. We lost someone, which is common when we do a group activity. I'm going to split you up into two groups. And so you'll see over here on this document to the side, there's group 1 and group 2. And both of these is the same document, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you all work together to kind of decide what of these line items belong in a budget. So
Diane, we can't see if you're showing us
oh, you can't see this.
Group 1 and group 2, we can't see that, or I can't.
Thank you. It's good to know. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So over here in the tab, there's group 1 and there's group 2. And so basically what you're going to do is you're going to work together to, so on page 2 here, there's a list of expenses that an organization had for January 2026. And so here are all the January expenses. And then on page 3, you're going to take these and you'll copy and paste where they should go under these budgets. So this is to help you with budget tracking. So up here is an example. So I had these 6 expenses or revenues and I just copied and pasted. So I put the donation from community members, contributed income, donation from a local business is also contributed income. And so then the amount ended up being 1,250. Then we have payment to deliver a workshop It's earned income. And so then total revenue was 1,750. And then over here, we had personnel costs. So volunteer stipends cost $400. Program cost was the catering for a workshop and space rental. So the total expenses was $900. And then down here, we just said to calculate the net income, 1,750 minus 900 equals $850 of net income for January 2026. So down here, I have you all to practice. So let's practice together. So let's start with January 3rd's individual donation. Where would this one go? So I'm going to scroll down here.
Contributed income.
Yes. So then I just copy it and I paste it there. And so then you'll come up here and then you'll just go over to January 5th. Where would this one go? January 5th.
Operating costs.
Yes. So then we go operating costs. So I'm going to share this link with you all, and then I'm going to break you up into two groups, and then your group will have the label of group 1 or group 2. So just find your corresponding tab. Just give me 1 second. And we're going to do this for 10 minutes. Okay, there's always an order to these things. Okay, hold on 1 second. It's always clunky. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to do the breakout rooms. Stop sharing. I'm going to chat. So the document is in the chat. And then you have your corresponding groups names. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. All right. So how did that feel? I see nods.
Hard to do on one screen on a laptop.
Uh-huh. But y'all did it though. So you just went through an organization's budget in 10 minutes and were able to track all of that. Pretty impressive, right? Not bad. How did it feel though?
I think it felt good, but I think one question that I wasn't sure where an item would go, and we kind of guessed, was vo a volunteer appreciation dinner, so spending for pizza, drinks, and supplies.
Mm-hmm.
We put that under operating costs.
Okay.
I don't know if
That's
fair.
interesting. Yeah. Well, and so here's the thing. There's no right or wrong answer to that. It could be your operating because you plan for every year, or it could be part of your program. But here's the thing. What's most important with your budgeting is being able to describe and defend why you made that choice to put it under operating versus program. That's all that is. It's just about advocating why you put something in a certain spot.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. What other questions can I answer? That was the end of it. So we have 1 minute left. I'm happy to stay after. I will be sending you all, I do have a version of this that's geared for you all to build out your own organization's budget, where you will list what your own predicted revenue and your predicted expenses are. That way you can work through it. But I wanted to demystify it by doing this. But what other questions can I answer today?
Well, I think piggybacking off Mira's point, I wonder, is there ever a time, I hear you say, as long as we can defend where we put it, but are there any that have to go in a certain place that you could get in trouble if they're not there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is something called restricted versus unrestricted funds. So a restricted fund, an example of a restricted fund was say you have a grant to do a certain work, or you have a contract to do certain work. That generally it has to be, the way you track it has to exactly match what you told the funder you would do, because the funder will ask you, how did you spend the money? And they will ask you for a report. So I'm thinking very specifically about one of our organizations has a grant with the city of Portland, and they said, we're going to spend this much on personnel, we're going to spend this much on rent, this much on programs, this much on workshops. And every month we have to go in with the very specific, there's like, by no exaggeration, 20 different line items that we have to track. And so there are situations when the funds are restricted to very specific usage where you would have to be very clear. Now, also, you wouldn't want to your revenue, you would want to make sure that you're appropriately representing it as well. But if it's a program versus an operating, something like what Mira was talking about, it's not as high stakes.
Very well. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, I'll stay behind and answer any other questions, but otherwise, I will release you all into the evening. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll follow up with the budget worksheet and a recording of this in the upcoming days, the upcoming, let's say, week. But thank you all. Take care.
Diane.
Thank you, Diane.
So much.
It was great to see everybody.